Hi everyone, my name's Lucy and I work here at Greater Manchester Mental Health Recovery Academy, and part of my role is to support people via training, and we wanted to continue to offer that support during this difficult time, so have started to create some online videos around managing your own well-being. Today I'm going to be talking about understanding and managing worry. This is something that I can certainly relate to, and I'm sure lots of people can during this difficult time and before this time as well. Now, before we do get started, I'm going to give you the opportunity a little bit later in the video to take part in a task. So what you'll need for that task is you will need some piece of paper or a post-it note, you will need a pen, and you will also need some form of bin or rubbish bag or something that you can get rid of something in. So what I'd invite you to do is press pause at this time, and if you do want to get involved with the activity later on, if you just go and get those things and then restart the video. Okay. So before we get thinking about how we can understand worry more and how we can manage worry, there's just a few things that I wanted to share with you to normalise worry really, and also to try and get us thinking a little bit differently about worry. So first of all, worry is normal. It's a normal human experience that most people at some point in their life will go through. Now, worry will consist usually of what if thoughts, so what if this happens, what if that happens, and they are usually future focused, and they are usually as well more along the negative lines. So for example, we don't worry what if we win the lottery, it's usually what if something goes wrong. And worries are often triggered by external events, so something might happen that makes us worry, or by our own unhelpful thinking patterns. So we might catastrophize about things, so think the worst possible thing will happen, and then that will make us worry about it. Now, although worry is normal, it can also become unhelpful and it can cause us lots of problems. And that usually happens when worry is frequent, so it happens all of the time. When there is multiple worries, so we're worrying about lots of different things, and also when we find it hard to control or dismiss that worry. Now, when worry becomes unhelpful, it can have a huge impact on our life. So it can impact how we feel physically, it can impact how we feel emotionally, it can impact what we're thinking about, and it can also stop us from doing things or making us do things a little bit differently that again may not be helpful for us. So worry is normal but can become problematic for us. Now, in terms of it becoming problematic, if you're sat there thinking, yeah, I can absolutely relate to this, which I can as well, please don't feel that you're alone, because 2 in 5 people report to worry at least once every single day. And research also tells us that an estimated 12 million Brits are awake worrying between 2 and 3 a.m. And usually those worries are about health or finances. But that's a lot of people that are awake with you and that are worrying with you. So please don't feel that you are alone. Now, something that I find really interesting about worry, and I think it's really important that we think about this before we even start trying to manage it, is how people view worry. So we normalise worry a lot, and sometimes, although it's important to recognise that it is normal, sometimes this can become a problem because people can dismiss the fact that they're having problems with worry because they say things like, well, I'm a born worrier, it's natural to worry, it's my job to worry. And it is natural to worry, however, it doesn't have to cause us a problem because there's ways we can manage it. So people often don't get support for worry because they just accept it as this is who I am. But actually there is things that we can do. The other thing that I find really helpful to think about when we're trying to manage our worry is the way we think about worry. So when you are talking about your worries, you will often talk about the thoughts that you're having whilst you're worrying. So I'm worrying about finances, I'm worrying about becoming unwell, I'm worrying about my job, I'm worrying about my relationship. And we try to think, well, I'm just not going to think about it, I'm not going to worry about it. And we try to just focus too much on the actual thought that we're worrying about. Now, when we want to work with worry, we want to try and challenge that view and think of worry as a behaviour. So the actual thing that we're worrying about, if you are a worrier, actually becomes almost irrelevant, because if we solve that worry, or we're able to dismiss that worry, we will just find something else to worry about. So one worry will replace another. And that's because we don't want to focus on the thought, we want to focus on the behaviour and change the behaviour of worrying, because that's what will help you reduce the worry, which will then help you reduce the anxiety, which will then help you feel better and then help you to function better as well. So we want to think about worry as a behaviour. It is something that we do. It's an active thing that we're involved with. So I like to think of it as a psychological treadmill. So if I asked you to run all day on a treadmill, how would you feel? Would you get off it when it became too much? You probably would. But we don't do that in our mind. So our psychological treadmill is going and going and going and going all day long, and we don't get off it. We just stay on it. And the techniques we're going to talk about today are going to help us get off that treadmill. Okay, so we know that worry is normal. We know that it can become problematic. We know that lots of people experience worry, and we know that it can be managed. So how do we do that? So the first thing that we need to do before we start to think about it being a behaviour and how can we change this behaviour and other ways that we can manage worry, the first thing we need to do is get to know your worries. So what I'm going to ask you to do is start to think about keeping a worry diary. So a worry diary helps us to understand our worries. It helps us to get the worries out of our head and onto paper. And this is a really helpful technique. It's therapeutic in itself, because when we've got so much going on in our head, we getting them out and just onto paper can be so helpful. So this worksheet that I'm showing you will be available on the website on screen, and there'll also be blank versions of any of the worksheets that I show you as well. So I'll just run through this with you. So the first column is situation, the second column is what is the worry, and the third column is how anxious did that worry make me, or if you felt anything different, you can just change that to what emotion and how strong was that emotion for me. So an example might be, so the situation here is in lockdown due to coronavirus, unable to see my mum, unable to work. So my worry was, what if my mum gets unwell? What if I can't pay my bills? And my level of anxiety was 8 out of 10 and 7 out of 10. Now notice with the worry, it starts with what if. So we want to try and make sure that we're working on worries and not thoughts. So a worry will be future focused around what if, and a thought would more be a statement. So an example might be, if I was thinking my mum will get ill, that is more of a thought and it's predicting the future and it's a catastrophic thought. So that's maybe more to be approached via an unhelpful thinking way. And I'll come back to that a little bit later on. So we want to look for those future-based what if thoughts that we're having. So what if my mum gets ill and what if I cannot pay my bills? And you don't have to do it like this. You could do it on your phone, you could do it on the computer, whatever works best for you. But the key thing to do, first of all, before you try any other techniques, is get used to writing your worries down. Get them out of your head and onto paper so you can explore them more and understand them more. So the next thing we need to think about is the types of worries we're having. So once we're getting to know them, we need to know what type we're having. There's two main types of worry that we are going to talk about. That first one is a hypothetical worry, and the second one is a practical worry. And it's really important that we start to see the difference in those types of worries because we deal with them in very different ways. So you will find as well on the website on screen this worksheet. There's other worksheets that do the same as well. One is called a worry tree. But this is called Find My Worry. And it's just trying to help us figure out, are we having a hypothetical worry or a H worry? Or are we having a practical worry, a P worry? So what it's asking you to do is notice the worry and write it down in your worry diary. So that's your first step. Now we're going to explore the difference between H and P worries. So a hypothetical worry, a H worry, is something that you cannot do anything about. It's something that there is nothing you can physically do. A practical worry is there is something you can do about it. So say, for example, my worry was about paying a bill. Practically, I could ring the company and ask them for a payment plan or a payment holiday or something like that. If I'm worrying about my mum becoming unwell, other than the usual things that we can do and that she can do, there's actually nothing I can do to stop her becoming unwell. Therefore, it becomes a hypothetical worry. I can't do anything about it. And this diagram will help you figure that out. So if you follow it, you wrote it down in your worry diary, it says, is this worry you can do something about? No, this is a No, this is a hypothetical worry. Use worry time technique, which we're going to cover. Yes, this is a practical worry. Use a practical problem solving technique, which we're also going to cover. Now, there's one other area of this to be aware of. So it might be that, yes, I can do something about my worry, but it's 3 a.m. in the morning and actually I can't do anything about it now. So that brings us to the last part here, which says, yes, but later. So it says, yes, but not right now. Treat this as a hypothetical worry because at 3 a.m. it is. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm going to write it down and treat it as a hypothetical worry. But what I am going to do is schedule a time where I could then apply a practical problem solving technique. So it could be at 9 a.m. when I plan to get up, I could do a practical problem solving technique and therefore it then becomes practical. Okay, and I'm just going to show you an example of a second worry diary, which again is on the website on screen. So here I've got the exact same situation. So in lockdown, unable to see my mum, unable to work. I've got what's the worry? What if my mum gets ill? What if I can't pay my bills? Then I've got my anxiety levels, but then I've added an extra column in this one, which is H and P. So when you're doing your worry diary, take it that next step further. Get used to writing those worries down first and then find out if they're H and P, because that will help you deal with them at a later date. Okie doke. So we've now started to get to know our worries a little bit more. And what I'm going to ask you to do is something else for that task I mentioned, which is going to happen a little bit later on. So what I'd invite you to do is have a think now about your own worries, and using that Find My Worry sheet from the website, or just using what we've just talked about, I want you to pick one hypothetical worry. So a worry that you can't do anything about. Something that is on your mind that maybe is reoccurring. You can't change it, but it's there. And I want you to write it down on that piece of paper or post-it note that we talked about right at the beginning. I want you to fold it away and put it to one side. So I invite you to pause the video and do that now. Okay, so we're going to come back to that a little bit later on, as I mentioned earlier. But what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to look at a specific technique to, first of all, manage practical problems or practical worries. Now, the reason that I would recommend doing your practical worries first is because what we want to try and do is lighten the load. So hypothetical worries, there's nothing we can do about them. We've already highlighted that, and that's how we've labelled it a hypothetical worry. Whereas practical worries, we can do something about. So let's lighten the load. Let's address those first, so then the hypothetical worries feel a little bit more manageable. Now, the way we address practical worries is through a practical problem solving technique. Now, problem solving is something that you've probably done loads of times before without a second thought. But what I want you to remember is if you're suffering from problematic worry, your anxiety is going to be higher, your mood might be lower. So those everyday practical problem solving skills that you would usually do without a second thought have been stolen from us. The anxiety, the low mood takes that away from us. So don't beat yourself up for not being able to solve these practical problems that usually you wouldn't have had a problem doing. And the technique is really simple, but it's meant to be simple. What often we can get trapped in a cycle of is trying to find some complex way to solve something, when actually what we want to do is treat complexity with simplicity. So treat something that's complex with something really simple. Don't make your life harder. So there's a specific worksheets that you can find on this website that will talk you through this technique. I'm going to talk you through it. You may not be able to see these worksheets, but don't worry because they're online. And also there's a blank copy of them, but also a copy of them with an example, so you'll be able to see the process. But we're going to talk through it, and I'm going to give you some top tips on each section to try and help you make it as effective as you can. So the first thing you're going to do is fill in this box. What is the problem I'm trying to solve? This is often the step that people miss. So we get caught up in all these worries, they become overwhelmed, and we try and solve them without knowing what we're trying to solve. So we want to get a specific thing that we're trying to solve, and we want to write it down. And what I would also recommend you doing is, once you've identified the problem, break it down again. Is there any other way you can break it down? So this says, do I need to break this down into smaller steps? So my example is, what problem is I'm trying to solve? What if I can't pay my bills? And then I've broken it down. I can't afford to pay my rent, and I can't afford to pay my phone bill. So now I know at 2 exact things that I'm trying to solve. It gives me a better chance to solve them because I'm not going to be pulled in all different directions. The next section is step 2, which is to look at solutions. So again, there's a key trap here that people fall into. So when we are feeling low and anxious, we get tunnel vision. So we will think of solutions that fit within that tunnel vision, and our mind becomes blocked. So what I would say to you at this point is, think outside the box. Even if a solution comes to you that you would never ever do, write it down, because it just opens our tunnel vision a little bit. It gets our brain thinking outside of our anxious thoughts or our low mood thoughts. It helps us to think a little bit wider. So my example is, well, my solutions to my pay my bills problem is, I could lend money off a friend. I could lend money off my mum. I could speak to different services to support me. I could apply for a payday loan. I could ring them and ask for a payment plan, or I could just not pay. I could avoid all letters and avoid phone calls. So they're my different options. Some of them I personally wouldn't do. However, I'm still going to write them down because I want to think about all these different options. So step 1, identify the problem. Step 2, think of any solution that you can. So another example for that was, say if my problem was about losing weight, one of my options could be get liposuction. Now financially, that's not an option for me, so I wouldn't do it. But I would still write it down to get my mind thinking. So step 3 is, think of the pros and cons, or the negatives and the positives of 3 of your top solutions. So read through your solutions and pick 3, and then think about the pros and cons. So I've just done 2 for today's example, but the 2 that I picked are, apply for a payday loan. Positives for that, instant money, bill will be paid, so less stress, easy and can apply online. But my negatives are, will I get myself into more debt, more pressure in the long run, high interest rates, and I might even get rejected for it, and that might make me feel worse. So I've got kind of a mixture here, but there's more negatives than positives. Now on this one, the next one I picked is, ring the company and ask for a payment plan. Positives, less pressure to pay now, won't be anxious about calls and letters, develop a realistic plan that I can afford, low interest rates, may be able to even take a holiday, a payment holiday, and also I'll feel more in control. Still got some negatives though. So the anxiety will increase when I have to ring. I feel like they may judge me. They could say no, and this may make me feel worse. So I've got less negatives here and more positives. So what I would recommend you doing then is having a look at the negatives and positives and seeing which is going to work for you. The key thing here is, do not pick the one just because it's got the most positives. So you could have 5 positives and 1 negative, but that 1 negative could outweigh all the positives. So don't get sucked in with, I need to have all the positives and no negatives. Negatives are okay if we can balance them and manage them. We want to pick the one that is best for you in your life at this time. So now you've highlighted which one you're going to pick, you would pick in, choose the solution based on your positives and negatives, or your pros and cons. So the one I picked is, ring the companies and ask them for the payment plan. So for me in my life, that would be the best one to do. So the next thing you're going to do is make a plan. So here's the other trick, here's the other trap, should I say, that we fall into, where we get a solution and then we think, right, that's what I'm going to do, but then we don't do it. And that because, for many, many reasons. But to help us action that, making a plan and breaking that down of exactly what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, is really helpful. So putting something into action can feel quite scary. We might have no motivation. We might be feeling quite low. There could be so many reasons why we might not do it. So we want a plan to help us do it. So on the make a plan, you've got prompts such as, what am I going to do? So here I've wrote ring Vodafone and landlord and tell them I can't afford to pay. Ask them for a payment holiday, ask them for a personal payment plan. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. When am I going to do it? Well, I'm going to do it today at 3 p.m. and I'm going to do it at my house. So when and where and with whom? So on my own, as I'm not allowed to see anybody at the moment due to lockdown. And then there's another section that says, what else do I need to be able to do to action my solution? So I've put FaceTime my mum prior to the call at 2:30 so I can get a bit of extra support. FaceTime my mum after the call to get a bit of extra support. And then do something I enjoy before it to help improve my mood. So we've now got chosen solution and we've got a detailed plan of what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it, where I'm going to do it, with who I'm going to do it, and also what else I need to do to make that more possible. So now what we need to do is do it. So if you're struggling with motivation, remember, break it down as much as you can because that will help you. Motivation comes after we start doing. So if we wait for motivation to come for us, we're going to have to keep waiting. Whereas if we do small chunks, that will build our motivation and make it easier for us. So the last part of the practical problem solving technique is do it and review it. So action your plan and then review what went well, what did not go well, and what have I learned. So things that went well for me. So in this particular case, this person got a payment holiday, they got a payment plan, they had the stress removed of not being able to pay. What didn't go well for them, they had a panic attack before they were due to make the call. That delayed them making the call, and then they got upset on the phone and struggled to express themselves. So it didn't all go well, but what did they learn? They learned it's okay to get upset, and actually the person was really supportive, and they learned that writing things down more would have helped them, and they learned they don't always have to manage things on their own. So what we can do then is use this in future practical problem solving techniques. So the last bit says, if my problem was resolved, is it a yes? Well, I want to praise myself and refocus on what I've learnt. If it was a no, I still want to praise myself because I've still learnt a lot and I'd still give it a go. But then I want to go back to my solutions and where I did my pros and cons and pick a new solution to try. So if it didn't go well, don't think all is lost. You will have learnt something through that, and you can never go back to square one because you can never unlearn what you have learnt. So don't beat yourself up. Go back to your solutions and your pros and cons and pick another one. It might be that it was only half resolved, so we might need new solutions. So go back to whatever stage you need to in order to then follow that process again. And that is a practical problem solving technique. Follow those steps, keep it simple, break it down, keep it clear, and then action the different things that you plan to do and review it so you can keep learning from it. Okay, so we're going to move on now and have a think about our hypothetical worries. So those worries that we can't do anything about. So this technique that I'm going to talk you through is often referred to as worry time or worry by appointment. And it asks you to only worry at a specific time during the day. Some people find that quite strange because they want to learn how not to worry, and this technique tells you to worry. But what we know about worry is that it's all about uncertainty and control. And the problem with that is we can never be certain about everything, and we can never be in control of everything all the time. So what we want to try and find a way is to take back some sense of control in a situation we can't control. So by controlling the time that we worry, it helps us put ourselves back in the driving seat. It teaches our brain that we can control our worry, and it reduces that feeling of anxiety overall. So we're teaching ourselves, our brain, new ways of thinking. We're addressing that behaviour of constantly worrying, and we're shortening that and only worrying at a certain time. So we're going to talk about how we do that. So the first step of worry time is setting yourself your own worry time that works for you in your life. And I would say no longer than 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and pick a time that you're going to be able to take yourself away as best you can and focus on your worries. I would say don't do it too close to bed, because what you don't want to do is be taking your worries to bed with you. So once you've set that time each day, the best time for you during that day, the next thing you're going to be doing is what we've already talked about, and keeping a worry diary. So whenever a worry comes in, you're going to write it down in your worry diary. You're going to put the situation, what the worry is, how anxious it made you, and also check that it is a hypothetical worry. Because remember, if it's a practical worry, we want to use the practical problem solving, not this one. Now, when you've wrote your worry down, we want to start to say to ourselves, I am going to worry about this, but not right now. And then we're going to refocus on what we're doing. And we'll talk a little bit about how we do that in a moment. So worry comes in. If it's not in our worry time, we write it down. We say to ourselves, we are going to worry about you, but not right now, and we're going to come back to you later. And then you will refocus on what you are doing. So you are just postponing and refocusing. If you struggle to refocus, it can be really good to do a practical activity. But we will talk about that in a moment. So every single time a worry comes in that bothers you, that is really difficult for you, you want to follow that process. Notice it, write it down, refocus. It can feel overwhelming sometimes. So I would start, if there's worries that really bother you, start with those ones as opposed to thinking you've got to write every worry down. Now what we're going to do, so we've done that throughout the day, and now it comes to our worry time. So say our worry time was 5 till 5:30. So it's come to that time, and now we're going to let ourselves worry. So we're going to read through our H worries in our worry diary, and we're going to examine them, think about how it feels now, think about what it was like to postpone that worry, think about, has that worry happened, has it come true, how did it feel? Think about it as much as you want. Use it as your opportunity to just kind of get it all out. Feel that anxiety, explore that anxiety in your controlled environment, and spend time reflecting on it. Once you've reflected on each of the worries, cross it out. Get rid of it, okay? So we want to mark it down that we've reflected on it. We've thought about why that was important, how actually important it is. Does it feel different now because we're out of that situation? And often that can be the case. And then we're going to cross it out, get rid of that hypothetical worry. We might actually think, this is a practical worry, and then we can apply a different technique at a later date. Then once your worry time is over, so now it's 5:30, what I want you to do is do something something practical. Refocus your attention in a way that is you actively doing something. Because you've just spent 30 minutes worrying, we now need to change our brain to thinking about different things and focusing on different things. This is why it's important not to have it too close to bed. Then what we want to do is repeat that process. So from 5:30, if any new worry comes in, we want to write it down, refocus, write it down, refocus until our worry time comes back around at 5 o'clock the next day. Sometimes people find it helpful to have 3 worry times in a day, so a morning, afternoon and an evening. So if you are consumed by worry and it feels too long to wait a full day, you can set your worry times differently. But the purpose of this is we are changing that behaviour. We are not constantly worrying all day. We are finding a way to retrain our brain that when a worry comes in, we are able to refocus, we are able to postpone it. And it can feel tough at times, but it's a behaviour, remember, so it takes time to change it. It takes practice, so don't give up. It can sometimes feel a little bit like a hamster wheel when you're running around that hamster wheel trying to write it down, refocus, postpone, but keep going, yeah? Set your worry time, write your worry down when it comes in, postpone that worry until your worry time and say it out loud to yourself, and then refocus on the present day. And eventually, our brain will start to recognise that actually it is okay and we can not worry all day, every day. Now, to help with the refocusing, you might have heard of a technique called mindfulness. So in its simplest form, what we're talking about there is focusing right now in the present day. So when we're worrying, we are thinking about the future. when we're ruminating, we are thinking about the past. In order to help us refocus and stop worrying or overthinking, we want to focus on what is happening right now. So to help you do that, there's another worksheet that looks like this, and you'll find it on the website, and it's called Focus, Focus, Focus. And what it asks you to do is engage all your senses. So when you're trying to refocus from that worry, pick an activity to do. What can I see? What can I hear? What can I smell? What can I taste? What can I touch? And focus on exactly what you're doing. Because when you're doing that, you can't worry about the future and you can't overthink the past. And this worksheet will help you practice that activity. The more you do it, the more easier this will become. So I'd really recommend giving that a go before you do worry time, because this will help you with that refocusing part. Okay, so we're going to move on now away from those two key techniques and think about other ways that can be really helpful to manage worry and the anxiety that brings. So the first thing I want to talk about is progressive muscle relaxation. So when we're thinking about managing anxiety, often people will talk about relaxation techniques, and they are really helpful if they're used in the right way. So what we don't want to do is become dependent on relaxation skills or relaxation techniques in reaction to anxiety. Because say if we're so used to using a relaxation technique when we feel anxious, and then we go out and we can't use that relaxation technique because we don't feel comfortable to do it in Tesco or at a friend's house, what will happen is our anxiety will become higher. So we still want to get to know these relaxation techniques, and these breathing techniques can be really helpful wherever we are. But what we want to do is actually get used to using relaxation within our everyday life and have it part of our routine as opposed to a reaction to something. That way, we want to become more relaxed overall, and that will help us reduce the anxiety in the long run. So the one technique that I think is really useful for managing worry and the anxiety that brings is this progressive muscle relaxation. Now what it does is it goes from the top of your head to the tip of your toe. It asks you to clench every muscle group and then release it. And it works through the muscle groups. So starting with our forehead, down to our shoulders, and so on, through our arms, all the way down through to our legs. And what that is doing is it's showing us the difference between clenching, between tension, and between releasing, relaxation. So it helps our mind to learn what the difference is. And what it wants us to do is overlearn that. So it wants us to do it every day for as long as we can until our body overlearns it. Because what will happen then is our mind will tell us. So if I'm tense and I'm so used to being tense that my body doesn't recognize it as tension, it will just keep being tense and my brain won't tell me to do anything about it. Whereas if I start to learn the difference between tension and relaxation, my body will recognize I'm tense, my brain will tell me, and then I can do something about it, as opposed to the tension building and building and building and building and building. So we're trying to overlearn what it is like to be tense and to be relaxed so that we can respond to that. Now there's a worksheet to help you do that, and that is on the website on the screen, and it talks you through how to clench and how to release, how long to do it for, and it's a kind of a nice flow diagram of how to do it as well. There's loads of videos online as well, so if you just look for progressive muscle relaxation if you prefer to do it that way, but I'd really encourage you to give that one a go. And research tells us if we do that once per day for 3 months, that's when we will really start to notice the full benefit of our body recognizing the difference. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the barrier of unhelpful thoughts. So we're not going to go through an unhelpful thinking technique because there's already one, and you can find that on this website, and that's myself again talking through a technique of how to challenge these unhelpful thoughts. But it's important to recognize that unhelpful thinking will play a part in helping us to progress on managing our worry. For example, if you have a belief that worry helps you in some way, or if you have a belief that if you don't worry, it will make you a bad person, or worrying will make you unwell, or all of these different unhelpful beliefs, particularly, for example, worry cannot be controlled, that will act as a barrier to those techniques that we've discussed today being effective. So what I would recommend you also do is have a think about your beliefs and your thoughts around worry. And if you notice that you've got any that might make you want to worry, which sounds a bit strange because on the surface you won't, but if you've got an underlying belief that there's some form of gain from worry, it's really important that you address that. And you would address that by challenging those unhelpful thoughts. And the video that we just mentioned a moment ago and is on the screen now will help you to do that. Okay, so we're going to look now at the final area of what can be really helpful to manage our worries. And it's a little bit different. Some people might enjoy this sort of work and others people might not, and that's absolutely fine. So we're going to have a talk about using our imagination. Now, our imagination is really powerful, and that's because the brain, as clever as it is, doesn't always know the difference between what is actually happening and what we're thinking about or what we're imagining. So we're going to use this to our advantage, and we're going to imagine a life without worry. And we're going to do this including the task that we talked about earlier on. So what I'm going to ask you to do at this point is take out your worry that you wrote down. So this one is mine, fold it up. Get your bin close to you or your bag. So this is my worry bin. And what I'm going to ask you to do is just listen and follow the instructions that I give you. And then I'm going to encourage you to keep trying this throughout your day. So what I want you to do first of all is open up your worry and focus on it. I want you to read aloud or in your head what your worry says. Now remember, this is a hypothetical worry, so we can't do anything about this. So read it, know that you can't do anything about it, and just think about it for a second. Now what I want you to do is fold that worry up, and I want you to rip it up into tiny pieces. And as you are ripping your worry up, I want you to imagine what your life would be like if that worry did not exist. Whether you believe it or not, imagine what it is like for that worry not to exist. And as you're putting it into your bin, into your small pieces, I want you to keep focusing on that. So that worry doesn't exist. You have a worry-free life. What would that be like? How would you feel? What would you do differently? Imagine yourself being somewhere nice, where there is no worry. And that worry that you wrote down is gone. See it being ripped up. Throw it away. Get rid of it. And once you've got rid of it and you've put it in your worry bin, I just want you to take, for the purpose of this exercise, just a minute to think, what would your life be like without worry? How would that feel? What would that be like? We know it's possible to manage worry, so what would be the benefit of that? See that worry go. Physically watch it go. Give it an object. Go, let it go out of the window. See the bin move it out of the way so you can no longer see it. You've ripped that worry up. You have got rid of it. Imagine that it is no longer there. Okay. Now, if you were doing that in real time outside of this video, I would really encourage you to take longer with that last part. So get yourself in a nice comfortable position, a nice comfortable room. But what you're doing there is you're writing that worry down and you are imagining it is going, because remember, the brain doesn't know if something is real or if it's just something that we're imagining or thinking about. And I would really encourage you to use that as part of a relaxation exercise, maybe before bed or first thing in the morning, but also just to help you get a break from that worry. So if you need a break from a worry, write it down, rip it up, get rid of it in any safe way that you can. Some people might really enjoy that, some people may not, but it's an exercise that we can give a go, and it can be something that uses our imagination to help us see those worries going. And it also takes practice as well to believe that that can help. So give it a go and see what you think. Okay, so we've come to the end of today's video. So I just wanted to leave you with some final thoughts. It is okay to worry, and worry is normal, but worry does not have to control your life. You can be in the driving seat. Managing worry is a skill, and it takes practice. So don't give up. Don't beat yourself up, because you deserve to feel the benefits of what it is like to be able to manage that worry. And I wanted to share with you one of my favourite quotes about worry. Now, the quote is, "Worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere." And my key message to you via this quote is you can stand up and get off this rocking chair. You do have the power to do that. And you can choose when and if you sit back down. Thank you. I hope you found the video helpful and stay safe.